What's a weird feeling you had about someone that later turned out to be true? I went to college in Kentucky. We met a girl named Angela who had a British accent. I was skeptical of her Britishness. We called her in the wee hours of the morning and she answered the phone as a sleepy American. In a thread filled with abuse, death, and sadness, you are my hero. I remember having a conversation in high school with my friends one day. If there was a school shooter in high school, who would it be? We settled on this kid Jordan. Jordan got arrested a year later for having bomb-making materials at his home. He supposedly confessed to a priest that he wanted to kill a few select students and administrators. I always wondered about my organ instructor in college. He was married with 2 children. Yet I remember sitting on the organ during lessons with him glancing at my crotch or finding excuses to touch my hands in order to demonstrate finger technique. After graduation, he confessed that he had been struggling with his emotions, not wanting to betray his wife and marriage, but craving something more, something deeper, with a male. I wished him luck and all the best as he worked through this, suggesting that he not look towards students, past or present, for the fulfillment he was seeking. Not me, but my mom. Both my brother and I went to Catholic school, which was attached to a Catholic church. None of our teachers were priests or nuns, but we went to mass every Friday morning. Everybody knew the priests in the parish, and all the kids at the school especially loved a priest who we called Father Matt. Father Matt was super nice, went to all the school events, helped with school fundraisers, and had a cool dog, a black lab who knew how to play dead when you shot him. Nobody had anything bad to say about Father Matt, except my mom. My mother did not like Father Matt. My brother was an altar boy. All the boys in a certain grade were altar boys. My mother insisted that my dad be in the same room with my brother the entire mass, including when the boys changed into their robes and prepared for the mass. Neither me nor my brother were allowed to go on field trips where Father Matt was the only chaperone. We weren't allowed to play with Father Matt's dog. When we went to mass on Sundays, which was rare, we went to the Spanish-English mass because Father Matt never did those. If you can't guess, my mother was convinced Father Matt was a pedophile. All of the parents and teachers at the school thought my mom was nuts. Some were even mad at my mom for trying to ruin Father Matt's reputation. My mom didn't back down. She lost a lot of friends, and I was uninvited to a lot of birthday parties. When I was in 7th grade, Father Matt was unexpectedly moved to a parish who needed his skills more than ours. Anybody who has seen Spotlight knows what that actually meant. He had gotten caught messing with an altar boy, and he had been moved to avoid charges. I asked my mom if she felt vindicated because she had been right or if any of other families felt stupid. My mom said she was just really sad. I think she really wanted to be wrong. When I say Catholic school, I knew exactly where this was going. There was a woman at my church who immediately read as a lesbian to me, like, pinged my gaydar so hard, but she was married and had 4 kids and seemed happy in her marriage and her life. Maybe 10 years after I first met her, and 2 kids later, her and I were having a fairly personal conversation and she confessed to me that she had always struggled with homosexual feelings, and even though she loved her husband, she often found herself resenting his masculinity. So, yeah, there was that. I get a very similar vibe from my husband's cousin, also married with a kid. Their marriage is so odd, and I'm convinced she's actually gay, but I also think she will never admit it. It doesn't help that all of her social media posts constantly boast humble brag about her marriage being to her best friend. It just screams trying too hard. My best friend and I had really bad vibes from our 5th grade teacher. He would rib his leg during reading time. There was rumors he was suspended years earlier for snapping a girl's bra. 8 years later I see his mugshot on the news for printing child pee on school computers. There was a guy at my university who was pretty popular. He got good grades, good looking, really personable guy. We shared a desk space for the first year of university in our studio. He was always really chatty and nice, but I didn't get too close to him because he always gave me a really fake vibe. My friend started dating him in our 2nd year, and pretty much dropped off everyone's radar after the first month of them dating. Like she wouldn't call anyone back or come hang out. She stopped coming into school. Eventually, halfway through the year, she suddenly dropped out and moved back to her home country. She got in touch with me, after dropping out, through Facebook. It turned out that the guy was super abusive and controlling. She said it got to the point where he was controlling how much she ate because he wanted her to lose weight. She's better now, back at home with her family. It makes me so angry to think that he probably targeted her because she was foreign and had no real support system in place, so the only way she could really get out was to blow up her education and return home. This went in a way better direction than I was expecting when she dropped off the map and stopped going to university. Oh boy, this happened a few times to my dad. Dad actually told mom to keep my brother's sisters away from a neighbor who introduced himself after moving in. A few years later he was arrested as a pedo. He also pegged another guy he saw in an elevator as something off about him even though they never talked. Bam. Another pedo. My dad has a sixth sense for these people or something. He also pegged another guy. I think I've told this story before, but my family had this landscaper for like 23 years. He started helping out with our yard when he was in high school, before I was born, and my mom and dad loved him. They even helped him with seed money to start his own landscaping company that ended up doing really well. They went to his wedding, knew his family, all that family friend crap. Starting when I was a really little kid, like 2 or 3. I would lose my crap every time he came over. I didn't know why. My family didn't know why. I just seemed to blatantly fear this guy for no reason. He was really charismatic, nice, good looking. There was literally nothing sketchy about him at all. My weird reaction to his presence continued until we sold the house when I was 16. I just got better at hiding it. My mom kept in casual contact with Mr. Pretty Landscaper Man, but they lost touch after a while. Fast forward to 2014 and we find out he's been arrested and later convicted for raping and attempting to hang his wife. His kids called the cops on him and when they showed up he was covered in blood and said something like, "Well, I might as well get this over with. She's in here," and brought them to the garage where he'd strung her up with a stool under her feet. I still don't know why I was so scared of him back then. In my strange circle of friends in high school, there was one guy who was just off. He was personable enough, but this was right after The Matrix came out, so the sunglasses and trench coat were now his style. Add in his distrust of authority, and you can see why I hung out with my friends, but kept this dude at arm's length. Fast forward a few years, and I hear reports that he murdered his family, including his younger sister. Turns out, he was adopted, hated his adopted family for years, and apparently just snapped. He's currently serving 3 life sentences. Girlfriend had really good guy friend before we started dating. Long story short, this dude was obviously into her in a very creepy way, and she seemed to egg it on and not know she was encouraging it. I used to talk to her about it often because it bothered me. Fast forward 2 years. I'm out of town. Girlfriend says she's going out with a few of our mutual friends and the guy is coming along. I get texts from our mutual friends saying they got pretty drunk and were acting way too nice to each other. I get home and ask her about it, because she knows it concerns me. She just tells me, "If you don't understand the relationship between me and him and I, then that's your fault. I've known him much longer than you." Find out a week later they've been hooking up for the entirety of our relationship. This is why I don't trust anyone. Back in high school, my best friend since preschool started to date a guy that I occasionally talked to on the bus. He seemed pretty cool until they got about a month into dating. That's when his controlling behavior started to show. He drove us to the mall one day and left us there because he got angry about me talking to his girlfriend about my relationships. He monitored her calls and texts, and she wasn't allowed to even mention another guy. He forced her into a corner at prom and danced in front of her so others could see her, then told her that her dancing was her trying to impress other guys. My other friend and I predicted he was going to get her pregnant right before graduation so she would be stuck with him because he made it very clear she was never going to leave him. A couple of years later, she was pregnant 2 months before graduation. They got married and are living miserably ever after. This crap makes me so sad. Semi-throwaway for obvious reasons. About 10 years ago I played WoW seriously. I was one of those power nerd 18-year-olds who barely left the house, was in a guild with a load of people I met through the game, got into a few conversations with a guy who became guild leader. He wasn't unpleasant. In fact, he seemed to be a pretty normal guy suffering from depression and using WoW as an escape. Something about him gave me the freaking creeps, though. I could never put my finger on what, but a dislike of him was one of the reason I left the guild not long after he took over. His character name was Anders Nordic, and he was Anders Breivik. Makes my skin crawl to think about. In broadcast school, there was this 50-something guy in the class below mine. He was just so creepy and socially odd. He also wanted everybody to call him Jim Matthews, neither his first or last name. This seems strange. What a boring nickname to give yourself. He later got fired from a low-level newsroom job when they learned he used to be a teacher who had been charged for having a relationship with a student. That's why he wanted to use an alter ego. Made me feel better for hating him. I'm not saying this to be a dong, but rather because I was unaware of this rule for quite some time and I want to share the wealth. It should be either neither nor or either or. I used to think you just said whatever you wanted, but apparently not. I had the feeling about a year ago that my wife was falling for a guy she met online. Fast forward to today, she's been at his house since Thursday and she's leaving me for him. Ouch man, that's terrible. I hope you're gonna be alright. I did not like my brother's, now ex-girlfriend at all, and no one in my family could understand why. They all said she seemed like such a sweet girl, but I thought she seemed a little off. Her nice attitude came off as extremely fake to me. Fast forward to December of 2013. It was during winter break, so everyone was home from college and my brother decided to have a little get together. Nothing huge, he just invited his 2 friends over and his girlfriend. My younger brother and I hung out with them that night as well. We had a good time and my brother's friends went home around midnight. That night my older brother slept on the couch, his girlfriend slept in my older brother's room, and my younger brother and I slept in our own bedroom. We woke up and had breakfast in the morning. Nothing out of the ordinary. Later that day my mom gets a phone call from her brother's girlfriend, parents saying that she was raped in our house last night. This shocked everyone because we were all hanging out last night and no one saw anything happen. She claimed that my brother's friend raped her around midnight last night before they went home. She initially claimed it happened in the bathroom and she screamed, but when we realized that couldn't have happened, she changed her story and said it happened in the dude's car. Her story didn't seem to add up and she later admitted she lied about it because she lost her phone that night and didn't want her parents to be mad at her. She figured that if she was raped, her parents wouldn't be mad at the fact that she lost her phone. She blamed the guy because she wanted to give him a BJ, but declined, so she was mad at him. She even wanted to get back with my brother admitting the truth and didn't understand why he hated her. Rape is obviously extremely serious and should be taken seriously, but we had police and CPS at our house because the girl lost her phone. The guy she blamed was questioned by the police and branded as a rapist. I am not undermining how horrible rape is. I just hate how someone can use someone else's traumatic experience and pass it off as their own because she lost her phone. Wanted to give him a BJ, but declined, so she was mad at him. She must be one of those folks who don't understand no means no. Had a math teacher in middle school who was a decent teacher somewhere in his 30s, but was a little creepy. He would always do this half grin half smirk, and lean down really close when checking homework. Many of us girls got the creeps. Halfway through the school year, he was arrested for having sexual conversations online with a girl around 12 or 13. I met this guy through my social network who just terrified me. For no reason whatsoever he scared me and I felt like I hated him and needed to get away from him at all costs. I wound up losing a lot of friends because he was really charming and nothing but polite to me, so they didn't understand why I was so rude to him. Wouldn't you know it, he raped 3 girls in that group within the next few months. No one reported anything. A few of them did acknowledge that I was right about him, but I was not accepted back into the group. He stayed away from me usually, until one time I told a friend to stay away from him and he must have heard about it. He cornered me in a stairwell and told me he'd never touch me anyway because I wasn't hot at all. Good, thanks. What the frick? You had some pretty crappy friends if they didn't let you back into the group after you were right about that guy. I shook my GF's uncle's hand at a party and got immediately creeped out. Hated him for some reason. Years later I learned he was raping his young daughter. I used to work in a thrift store chain and a new manager took over. Upon seeing him, my stomach immediately dropped. Never before have I gotten such a bad vibe off someone. Not only was he a pervert, he liked to force hugs on people and once even pulled up a female volunteer's skirt with a stick. He pretended to be gay, so when the disgruntled staff took it to the owner, he was like, LOL, he is gay. So totally not sexual harassment. Lol. What? The kicker? The proceeds from the store went to charity, and when my friend looked him up, it turns out he had a conviction from working in another store and stealing anything remotely valuable that was donated and selling it for himself. Now, I can't say for definite if he was running the same scam here, but he suddenly imposed strict rules on staff buying items. Before, staff got first dibs on donations, and my other friend noticed a few items going missing, but couldn't ever remember putting them out on the shop floor. The owner didn't care though. I suspect he was in on it, and as far as I'm aware, he still works there. Needless to say, I stopped turning up to that job fairly swiftly. I hate how people think it is okay for gay dudes to be totally inappropriate towards women just because they're gay. Like, no, it isn't okay for you to grab my boobs, gay bar door guy. I don't give a crap if you're gay. When I was about 14, my mom started dating a guy she met off through a friend of a friend of a friend, etc. The minute I met him, I did not like him. I just knew there was something weird. I couldn't place it. He was nice. He tried to be friendly with my brother and I to win us over. We went to a dinner movie and he bought us something from the mall the day we met him. He had 2 kids as well. One boy 3-4 years younger than me and one girl about 8 years younger than me. Over the course of a couple months, I picked up on some weird things when we'd be around him. He would tell me I should wear my hair down because boys like it more. He noticed I slept in my room with the doors locked. I was afraid of him, and he would mention that I shouldn't do that in case of emergency. Just things like that. One night my brother and I were staying at his house. My mom worked nights, and his little girl did not want to sleep in her bed but wanted to sleep in his. He asked me to lay down with her while he did work in his office to try and get her to sleep. I agreed to. After a bit he started pestering me about if I was thirsty or not. Are you thirsty? No. Are you sure? I can get you something. Yeah, I'm sure. This kept up for a bit off and until finally I said yes to some water. He got me some and brought it to me and I had a weird flash to a Harry Potter book. Something about Moody being disappointed in Harry taking an unknown drink from an enemy. So I took the water and set it down and didn't drink it. After a bit he came in and asked if I drank my cup. I hadn't obs and his daughter was asleep by then. I picked her up and put her in her own bed and went to sleep in the room with my brother. I had my own room at his house but I was afraid to sleep alone that night. Anyway, I am really creeped out by that night and tell my mom and she refuses to believe me. So, I tell my brother's dad that I never want to go back to the guy's house and why. A big drama starts over it. My mom is mad because I'm accusing her BF of being a creep and my brother's dad is raising heck about it and insisting my brother and I never spend the night there again. I end up basically living with my brother's dad for about a month when my mom finally leaves the guy. Fast forward 5 years, my mom, who has worked for the police for a long time, comes home and goes, "You'll never guess who we brought in last night for touching a little girl." I mean, there's only one person I could think of, so Kevin. She was completely dumbfounded and refused to believe that I called this a long time ago and that she gave me a load of crap for it. Turns out, his daughter brought a friend over to spend the night and she told her mom he tried to get her to show him this or that, but did not succeed as far as I know. Gonna be buried, but frick it. Go with your gut. Man. I wonder if there are any other kids who literally only managed to avoid being roofied because of Harry Potter. There was a kid in grade 12 who was older looking than all of us and knew so many of us thought he was a narc or something. I always had this weird feeling around him. Well, fast forward 3 years and I go on Facebook and the son of a B was arrested for having a small Asian girl chained up in his basement. He trafficked her in just to perform rape fantasies and crap on her. We were doing a small network server Cat 5 install job at an electrical firm in North NJ. We had to do the work at night when nobody was there. The CFO was this creepy guy who would stay with us. One night my brother brings his 10 years old son with us and this guy seemed overly friendly. We all got this bad vibe from this dude. Fast forward a month or so and I get a call from my brother. Quick, turn on the news. I turn the TV on and there is creepy CFO being perp walked on the news by his local PD. Turns out he was overly helpful with the boys' soccer team. He had molested several boys over the course of a few years. He had a wife and 2 kids, the sick frick. My best friend's boyfriend was a rapist. I was 17 at the time. So was she. So was he. She met him at a party that I didn't attend. She had been telling me about him for a couple of weeks. I finally met him and the vibe I got from him was not good. I felt like he might be the kind of guy that likes to hurt women, and not in the acceptable BDSM way. I warned my friend that I got a bad vibe from him and she needed to be careful. 2 weeks later he took her to a party and he turned up the music and took her to a room and raped her. She didn't understand why he would do that when all he had to do was ask and they could have consensual sex. I explained to her that for rapists it's about power, not sex. Later we found out that he had raped at least 10 girls before her. So yeah, listen to that gut feeling I have. Everyone thought the IT guy at school looked like a pedophile. Saw in the paper about a year later his wife reported him to the police because she found child pornography on his computer. A friend's girlfriend was extremely bitchy and used to boss our friend around. I'd known her for a while and never liked her, but I couldn't tell if she was abusive or just one of those nasty girls. Turns out after 8 years together he found out she had been cheating on him for years. But what was worse was that she controlled all of his bank accounts, had all of his passwords including ones for work, so he had to plan his escape. The dude is so much happier now, planning to travel the world. He finally has freedom and has even found a girl he likes. A few years ago, I was going through a rough patch with my best friend. We were nice to each other, but things were still tense. At the same time, he met a gorgeous girl who seemed crazy for him. When I met her 2 weeks into them dating, they seemed really head over heels for each other. They moved in with each other within 2 or 3 months, which seemed really fast. By that point, I rarely saw him, so I wasn't sure if it was because he was still angry with me, if he was just really occupied with his new GF, or both. 5 months into the relationship, she proposed to him. She was really nice and gracious, but I always felt something was kind of fake about her. Out of fear of estranging my friend further, I kept it to myself since I couldn't prove anything. I remember at their engagement party, there were about 30 or so of her friends but only 7 of his, even though I knew he had way more friends than us 7. I wasn't sure if he willingly chose to only invite so few of his friends or if it was her decision. As nice as she was, she didn't make much effort to speak to any of us and spoke to me even less because I was the only single guy in the group, because she seemed more interested in speaking to couples. I only saw my friend 3 times throughout the entire relationship, and except for the last time, when he snuck out to hang out, she was always there. He broke it off with her shortly afterward. It was more or less what I had suspected. She was super possessive of him and he couldn't do anything, go anywhere without her permission. Hence me never seeing him. She was more interested in the concept of being married and having a man than who he really was as a person, which was why she was only interested in speaking to other coupled friends and not me. He was like a little puppy dog that she could show off to everyone. She ended up keeping the engagement ring out of spite. He nearly broke into the condo he had since moved out of to get the ring back, but I talked him out of it and convinced him to move on. There was a guy in my church who set off a few people's alarms. He was new to the congregation and immediately started trying to volunteer in the children's ministry, which is unusual. Usually people want to attend without volunteering for a bit to get a feel for the church and make sure it's a good fit. But he also had a history of working in children's ministry in another church, so it wasn't that weird. And we contacted that minister and they had no complaints about him. We noticed that he always seemed to be hanging out near the kids during informal events like picnics and stuff. He never did anything obviously untoward, but something just seemed really off, so we always kept an eye on him and never let him volunteer around the kids. He wound up leaving pretty quickly. About a year later I saw him in the news. He was arrested for possession and distribution of child pornography. Then a few years after that I saw him in the news again because he'd been to prison, was out on parole, and then assaulted a young girl, so was arrested again. I still worry that he had other victims at that church where he worked in the children's ministry before he came to our congregation, and I'm so glad that we listened to our instincts. There was this guy that went to my school. We don't know if he had special mental disorders, but he was a little off. Now, this kid was a friend of mine and we talked a lot and he would spend the night at my house occasionally. Even though I always had this feeling that this kid would be the one to rape someone in the future, I was still a friend to him. So in 8th grade, about 3/4 of the way through the year, it was discovered that he had this special journal. In this journal he would write in graphic details about beating and raping multiple girls in my grade and beating several guys, many of which I was close to. I was surprisingly not surprised and immediately cut ties with him. Now this kid and I have a mutual hatred for one another. TLDR. Had a feeling that a friend of mine in 8th grade would rape someone one day. It was later discovered that he had a journal about raping men of female classmates. We are no longer friends. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.